Welcome back to this random live of Monday. So, today I want to talk to you about the webinar that I'm going to do this week, which is about addressing our own objections. And so I really encourage you to come to the webinar because I will be talking even more in details of how to address your own objections so you can get to living the life you want to be doing the things you want to, and start experimenting and being in it instead of being in the place of ruminating, indecision, not really knowing or not really doing anything about it. And then down the road when the time passes feeling like, okay, I could have done this and I could have done this and I didn't, and then um, staying in self regret, which is not useful, right? So that's why I'm really doing this webinar that I have prepared, and I will be even like saying some of the things that some of the objections that I keep seeing people keep making for themselves and never addressing them. And I think the skill that we're needing is how we can best or easily or effectively address any objections that we have when it comes to making certain changes, right? So the objections that I keep hearing from my humanitarians are these ones, and I will be looking at my notes to tell you all of them. I have listed them out, but I want to talk to you today about one objection, excuse me, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. And then in the webinar, we'll be diving into all the other objections, and then what is the formulaic way of you can approach this for yourself in terms of resolving it, and working with a coach to resolve it as well if you wish to. So the objections that I see from my people are the following: is first one is around decision, which we'll be talking about today, and the decision of it's too fast, or it's overwhelming, or it is not really within my control. Whatever it is around decision, or it's a wrong decision, right? So these are the objections that we have around decision, meaning that we are standing in our own way, or we are going against ourselves. So on the one hand, we're desiring to make the change, to want to do something else, or to uh, do the same work but in different ways. We want to have that, we have that desire, and on the other hand, we're opposing to our own desire, right? So this is what I see, what I mean when I say addressing your own objections, meaning that you have the desire and you have the objection, and then how you want to address it. And I see that many of us don't really do that, or we don't do it in the effective way, meaning that we can get to the place of starting to do that, being that person doing those things. But we spend a lot of time in this period of rumination and indecision and all of this, which then makes us even further delay what we want to do, simply because now we have reinforced our fear, reinforced of how it won't work and all of this, and therefore we have now hard time even more to believe that what we want is possible, right? So that's the first one. The second one I see a lot is that I don't know, or I feel stuck, right? So these are like the two ones that I see the objections, meaning that we are telling ourselves we want to, but we're also saying we don't know what it is, or we are saying that, oh, I feel stuck in not knowing, or I feel stuck in not knowing how to figure out and all of this. The third one is what if it's a mistake, right? It's just another expression of fear, but in a very logical sounding way. The fourth one is I need more information. It's the same type of rumination, only that we feel like it's a very logical, a normal thing to do, obviously. So we should be doing that. The fifth one is it won't work, basically, right? That's another of our objection, meaning that we can think of all these different ways of how to and what to, and then we just like cut ourselves in the middle of those brainstorming, or even if we have finished those brainstorming, still telling ourselves it won't work. The sixth one is I need a financial stability, or whatever stability we're wanting, right? Which is another part of our objection, meaning that we're basically telling ourselves that we don't have that, or we won't have that if we transition, if we do something else. And therefore, even though this desire is there, we want to do things, but then we object to our own desire by saying financial things get in the way, or we don't have the stability, or we won't have it. Or another variation of it is that it's expensive, or I can't afford it, or whatever the other like phrases that we use. But essentially, all coming down to we can't make it work financially, right? That's our objection to our own dreams. The next one is I need to be responsible, meaning that the message behind I need to be responsible is I'm not being responsible person if I make this transition, right? Another one is I'm not good at it, or I haven't done it before, right? That's used to be a lot of my objection to myself before. And the other one is, who do I think I am? Right? I think that's another objection that we have, is that we don't believe that we're that type of person who can do that. Maybe others can, but we are sure not, right? That used to be also my objection to myself. It still continues to be in some areas. And then essentially, I don't believe that I can do this, right? So that all of this come down to essentially I don't believe I can do this. This is like the core of the objection that we have. Now, in the webinar, I will be talking about all of this and then how to address all of this with one or two different approaches. But here, what I want to speak to about the decision, because I find that decision will always make the first step happen towards whatever we're wanting to do, or first step to exploring all the fears that come up after we have made the decision, right? So that's why decision always is the starting point for transitioning, whatever it is, whether to stay, whether to leave, whether to do something else, whether to go for something third, whatever it is, the decision in the end, what's important is that we make that decision. Now, when we make that decision, we oftentimes have a lot of our objections around making decision, and that's why we continue being in this rumination, in this indecision mode, in this in-between mode. That's the reason why we are in that mode, right? So that's why our first objection that we want to address is, why are we not making a decision? Right? This is the thing, is that when we ask ourselves, why are we not making a decision? To transition, to live the life we want to make the impact we want to, whatever it is, in the place where we are or somewhere else. We believe that if we make the decision, obviously, then we need to confront all of our fears, right? So that's uncomfortable. We believe that if we don't make a decision, then we just continue being where we are, and that's not bad either, even though that's not comfortable, that's not really where we want to be. But at the same time, we just feel like decision is something that um, needs time. I think we tell ourselves the lie basically is to say it needs time, it can't be done fast, it's just something we're thinking about, and we just keep like telling all of these words or phrases without really being clear as to, okay, is this something we're going for, or it's not going something we're going for? If it's not something we're going for, okay, let's make a decision about that. If we're something we're going for, let's make a decision about that as well, right? Whichever the way it is. The goal is not to um like go for transitioning. The goal is being clear as to what is it that we're wanting in that part or in that period of our life. So that's why, how can we best address that objection of ours that make us make a decision, whatever it is, right? So that's why I suggest that whenever you're making your whenever you are considering different options and making decisions, think about first what the feeling comes up if you decided, like if you went for a decision, whatever the decision is, what feeling comes up. Feeling may be like it feels scary, it feels overwhelming, it feels uncertain, unclear, whatever it is, right? So check all of those feelings with yourself in terms of making decision. So why are you not making a decision, basically, right? And then the feeling may come up. The feeling might be scary. Okay, then you like have this conversation with yourself to say, okay, why is it scary? Because I'm afraid that I will lose all the things. Then you can have another conversation, like continue that conversation until the end, basically saying, okay, is that true that you will lose it all? What will you lose? What does that mean even to lose, right? What will you gain after having done the transition or going for the transition? What are the things you will lose? So you just have the conversation that is as open as not escaping or as like look at all of your objections coming behind that decision, basically, right? Look at all of them without making yourself feel bad, without judging yourself, or without saying that, well, you should know this, or you shouldn't be even thinking this, or why are you even thinking this? All of this, don't do that to yourself. But just allow yourself to have this conversation in the all honest, open, um, like loving possible way to say, okay, I'm scared. Understandable because you have never done this before. Absolutely. But just because you have never done this before doesn't mean that you can't do this or you can't try, right? You know all of these things already, right? So that's why if the conversation is around, oh, it will be a wrong decision, then you get curious as to what do you mean by that, right? With yourself. What do you mean it's a wrong decision? What would make it a wrong decision? What would make it a right decision? According to your definition, right? So when we have this type of conversations with ourselves honestly and having all the cards on the deck, I think it's called, right? Or writing it down even. I always write things down. I always write things down in this way. I just say, okay, I need to make a decision about something, right? Whatever it is. And then I say, okay, but I feel scared that to make this decision. And then I say, okay, why am I scared to make this decision? Because I feel like it will go wrong. And then I ask myself, how would it go wrong? What is that wrong would mean? Um, and my brain may say, well, because then I feel like everyone will judge me or I will lose everything. Okay, if everyone will judge you, then what are you going to do about it? If it doesn't go the way that you thought it would go, what are you going to do about it? Are you willing to go through this or are you not willing to go through this? Would this make sense for you to go through this or not? Why would it make sense to go through this instead of staying where you are, right? Or how to make this work where you are instead of going to somewhere else. So when I have that honest, open conversation with myself until the end, until I have no more questions, until I have no more further objections to my own desire, then I have everything like put it out onto the paper, right? And then I see, going back at my notes, I see that where my fears are, I see where I was tripping myself up. For instance, I see a lot of my clients trip themselves up at the place of what if it's wrong decision, or what if I'm doing this out of fear when I could be doing this out of freedom? What if this is something else? And then they keep asking themselves this what if question. And then I always ask them to answer that question, right? Whatever our brain comes up with a question, we need to answer them. Otherwise, it will just keep ruminating on those questions in the background or in the foreground. So that's why the decision is always wonderful for us to then say, okay, this is the decision based on my thinking. Here are the ways I'm thinking about it. Here are the reasons I'm thinking about it because of which I want to make this decision. And I want to also stand by my own decision without making myself feel wrong or later blaming myself for having made the decision. Because at the time when I made this decision, these were my thinking, these were my reasoning, and I want to stand by those reasoning, even though they may not be similar to what other people expect of me or whatever else. Right? So So the technique really here is for us to be able to look at all of our objections without being scared of them, without being intimidated, or without feeling like we shouldn't have them or judging them, but just having all of our objections on the table and then deciding what to do with those objections as well. Right? So it's interesting that whatever the objection our brain brings to us, we can always decide what to do with it. We can say, okay, am I willing to make this work, or am I not willing to make this work? Is this worth me going through this, or it's not worth me going through this? Do I want to keep ruminating on this? Do I want to make a decision? Why do I want to keep ruminating on this if that's what keep happening, right? Because I believe it's too fast of a decision, for instance. Okay, what decision, or what makes it too fast, right? What is my definition of, oh, this is too fast? Because we don't want to be an impulsive people, or we don't want to be making decisions on the whim or whatever, right? So checking with ourselves in terms of feelings of when we're having this conversation, having all of these feelings around this activity that we want to do. In this case, it's a decision, and we feel like this is our objection. We don't want to make a decision, right? Then exploring all of the feelings around it, and then seeing, it makes sense that because of these feelings, because of these fears that I'm telling myself, that I don't want to make a decision, obviously, because my brain is not allowing me to make a decision, and instead keep being in the rumination phase, because it feels like all of these fears will materialize. But then answering those fears with, am I going to make this work? Am I going to address this fear? How am I going to confront this fear? Or do I want to do that? Do I not want to do that? When we start having all of this conversation, everything becomes more clear. And that's why we do coaching, right? When we do coaching, that's exactly the conversation we have with my clients to say, okay, I am afraid of making this decision. Why are you afraid? Because this and this will happen. If this will happen, what are you going to do about it? Do you want to do something about it? Are you willing to go through this? All of these questions will come up, and then we just keep answering and answering to the point where we have heard all of our feelings around this. We have heard all of our objections around this, and we have answered all of our objections around this. Then one decision emerges. And then we just feel like, oh, this is what my coaching is. Every time I get coach, afterwards I feel this, and then I'm like, yeah, I know what I'm afraid of. I know why I'm not making a decision. I know why I'm ruminating. And here is why I don't want to ruminate. And here's how I want to make a decision. And here are the reasons why I make this decision. And here's how I will implement it. And this can take even like 30 minutes or even less, depending on how well you have this conversation with yourself or with your coach. And then rest of the time you work on the plan and implementation of it, instead of staying in this rumination or indecision or in between mode. And that's why I think coaching is a great tool to help us to really look at all the things without being afraid of them. We're putting all the things out onto the desk, onto the table, and then say, okay, what am I going to do with all of these things? With all of my feelings, with all of my fears, what am I going to do with this? And how am I going to address them? What are my answers to them? And what are my next steps to go forward? So, my dears, I would love to help you address your objections in whichever way the objections that you keep having against your own desires, against your own dreams, against your own visions of how you want to live life. I would love to address you or help you address all of this. So come coach with me, and absolutely come to my webinar that I will be announcing soon. And we will be addressing all of the other objections in more detail. So you will see how you can do that yourself and how you can do that with a coach in a coaching session. So have a beautiful week, and I'll be speaking to you very soon. Thank you so much.